Greetings, I'm Caffeine Rage, and welcome back to the Sunday Sampler. This week we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Getting back to the roots of the Sunday Sampler and doing something a little bit random as we take a look at cheap games on the Steam Winter Sale. This is going to be my Christmas video coming out on Christmas Day, so if you are getting something for a loved one, well, first of all, you're a little bit late because this is coming out at noon on Christmas Day, but if you got a Steam card or, traded in some of those unwanted socks, you'll be able to get a cheap game. All the games on this list are $10 or less, with some of them being just a couple of bucks. And these are all games that I've played enough that I could feel comfortable enough vetting for. I will say that I know that there's going to be games that should have been on the list that are not on the list, so if that's the case, then leave a comment down below, and I'll take a look at them for next time for the summer sale, assuming that this becomes a tradition. And also, these games are not in any particular order, and there's actually more than 10 because of how some of the entries on this list kind of play out, but we'll talk about that when we get to them. Anyway, let's kick it off with number 10. Okay, let's kick this off with actually the worst deal on the list. Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley is essentially a love letter to the old Harvest Moon games. If you haven't played Harvest Moon, it's one of those games that is deceptive in that there's a lot more to it once you get past the surface. Yes, you are tending crops and taking care of animals, but it's also a relationship game. Building up friendships with the different townsfolk, building up relationships with potential mates, and also fishing, mining, actually some combat in Stardew Valley that's really not that apparent in the older Harvest Moons. Yes, their combat is there, if I recall correctly, but it's never really the forefront like it is in Stardew Valley. It's one of those games that you could just sit back, chill, and at the end of a long day and just relax. It's something that I think has to be experienced really to understand, and it's dipping just below the threshold of $9.99. So it's one of those games that it's right at the peak of a impulse buy. So if you want to try something different, check out Stardew Valley. I think you would be surprised if you give it a chance. So let's go on with number 9. Okay, I'm back with my first double listing, Fallout New Vegas and Fallout 3. Both of them are the same price, so it really comes down to personal choice, or what the heck with it, maybe you just want to get both, but let's talk about them just a little bit. They are very similar, but at the same time very different games. They came out within a couple of years of one another. Fallout 3 coming out in 2008, if I recall correctly, with Fallout New Vegas coming out in 2010, if memory serves me correctly. And they are very similar in that they're building the same engine and they have the same basic ideas. I mean, they are Fallout games. But where they differ is their focus. Fallout 3 built up its world, the wastelands of the US capital, Washington, D.C., and its suburbs. But it kind of faltered when it came to story. And it didn't really feel like you had much input on what was going on, that you were along for the ride. That it was about the journey, not the destination. Well, Fallout New Vegas, it has a lot stronger characters, and it has a story that gives you actually a surprising amount of choice in it. There's a great deal of different endings, not counting the slight variances that you get just depending on how you treat your followers in different settlements. And it's that really kind of sells New Vegas to me over Fallout 3. Both of them are very good games. And with DLC that has kind of a mixed bag, going from kind of meh to absolutely amazing. So there's really not a loser in either one of these. It's just where you prefer your focus. If you like your worlds to be a lot stronger, and remember, these are Bethesda games, or at least both of them are produced by Bethesda, because New Vegas is an Obsidian game, which is why it has a bit of a more focus on story and character development over just building up a world. But because these are both Fallout games in the Bethesda style, they are very moddable, and there's a ton of mods for both of these games, so there is a lot of content to go there. So it really just comes down to if you want to focus on the world itself or the characters and the story in it. Neither one is a real winner or loser. It just comes down to personal choice. Base game for either one of these is $2.29, but I would really suggest getting either the Ultimate or the Game of the Year edition, which has all the DLC in it, because like I said, you will want to come back for it if you get hooked in these games, and it's not that much of an investment money-wise, but it adds so much content, particularly to New Vegas, because New Vegas has some amazing content. Not saying that Fallout 3 has crappy content, it's just Old World Blues is just one of those DLCs that you play and you talk about forever. And I don't want to spoil anything about it. So let's move on to our next entry in the list, or should I say entries. Okay, out of a double listing, right back into another double listing with Portal and Portal 2. Is there really anything to be said about the Portal series at this point? Two absolutely amazing games made by Valve, and really set a new bar for the first-person puzzler. There's just so many things about this game, of these two games, that kind of was groundbreaking at the time that we kind of take for granted now. The quirky narrator, the tight physics, the fact that it's a first-person puzzler. Yes, I know Valve didn't invent the idea of a first-person puzzler, but they refined it to the degree that everybody was talking about the keg being a lie when Portal originally came out. And for good reason, because it is quite the amazing game. And I would be surprised if nobody on this list is, or nobody that's been watching this list has no experience with Portal. It's just one of those games that is out there, and for good reason, because when it goes on sale, it goes deep discount. It's the original Portal is only $1.99 right now, with Portal 2 being $3.99. But I would actually suggest, if you've never played Portal or Portal 2, to pick up the bundle. It's $4.99, and it is a continuous story. Portal 2 picking up immediately after the first Portal, and the first Portal is essentially a tech demo. It's a very, very short game, and it doesn't really start picking up until, I would say, about halfway through. It's one of those games that, well, it was essentially a bonus item on the orange box when it came out. And nobody was really expecting Portal to be anything. And I think that's part of the reason why it really took off, was that it was completely unexpected. So if you have never played it, I would say get the bundle and don't believe her lies. Okay, I know what you're thinking. Another one of these? But yeah, Eurotrip Simulator is another one of those really, really deceptive games. It is a very simple game, but at the same time, it has that relaxing quality that I really like in some games, just to be able to veg out. But it's really about your truck and just going from point A to point B in really a beautiful landscape. And that's what Eurotruck and its American cousin, American Truck Simulator, is all about. Just exploring a landscape and listening to various internet radios or podcasts or whatever have you. It's really a podcast game. It's kind of like Stardew Valley in that, where you can just kind of veg out. Granted, you have to pay a little bit more attention in Eurotruck, just because those speed traps will get you if you're not very careful. And American Truck Simulator is not on a double listing on this just because it didn't make the cutoff, but it's there if you want it. Eurotrip Simulator is 75% off, bringing it down to $4.99. And its expansion packs, except for the newest one, which adds new areas in France, are also very, very cheap right now. And if you have Eurotrip Simulator, I would suggest checking those out, because even though the base map is very pretty, the expansions to it in Eastern Europe and Scandinavia and in France are just amazing. It just completely blows away the old map, which makes me just want to stay in those new areas, to be perfectly honest. Anyway, on to the next entry. Alright, now with a little bit more action with Call of Juarez Gunslinger. On its own, it would be a fairly run-of-the-mill, I would say about above average first-person shooter. But where this game really excels is in its story and how it handles its narration. It's one of the few games that that I've seen that the unreliable narrator has really an impact on the game itself. Throughout the story, the narrator will change the story or make a change in a detail that changes how the level itself is played out. In one particular level, you'll go through the level 3 or 4 times if I recall correctly, going through different paths or opening up new paths as the story is retold through different perspectives. And it's just something that is really cool, and plus it's an old West setting that has not really been played out. So it's just all those little things come together to make a really, what would be above average game just extraordinary in my opinion, and one of the better Call of Juarez games. Granted, some of the older Call of Juarez games just do not run on modern systems, so it's kind of a low bar to be perfectly honest. Anyway, it is 50% off, which brings it to $7.49, and it is well worth that entry. Okay, this is my last double entry on the list, so let's get it over with Trine and Tron 2. Both really unique platformers. Well, can they be both considered unique if they have the same twist on it? Granted, they are both by the same developer, of course, but I'm probably digressing a little bit, which is hardly unusual. Anyway, both of them are puzzle platformers, physics puzzle platformers, where you control one of 3 characters and you're able to swap to them on the fly. And each character has a set of skills that they're able to use. The mage is able to summon items, different planks or boxes or floating triangle pyramid thingies. The knight is skilled at melee combat and can take a lot of damage thanks to his shield being able to block damage incoming. And the thief is very agile, able to use her rope to be able to swing up to higher ledges, and in combination with the mage to be able to go off of his floating pyramids to reach otherwise inaccessible areas. And she's also excels at ranged combat with her bow. And it's one of these games that you just look at and you wonder why you don't see more of these games. Granted, they did lose the magic, if you pardon the pun, in the third entry in the series, with Tron 3 wanting to go more 3D, and they really simplified things far too much, where they took away the upgrade system which the 2 previous games had. But these games, if you're a fan of puzzle platformers and you haven't played the Tron series, I wonder what you're doing, because they are exceptionary, and they are also very, very cheap. So if you're even mildly interested in the puzzle platformer genre, these are two games to really kind of get your feet wet. Tron 1 is 85% off, bring it down to $2.24. And Tron 2 is 85% off as well, bring it down to $2.99. And there is a combo deal that has all 3 of the Tron series in it, but honestly, I do not think Tron 3 is worth it. And getting the first 2 Tron games is a lot cheaper anyway, so or getting them separately, I should say. So I'll leave that completely up to you. If you want to get the third Tron series and at least try it, well, there's your option. Anyway, moving on. Okay, so who's ready for the Christmas field trip? Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons. The real heart of the list, and, well, the game that will pull the heartstrings the most in this list, I should say as well. I don't want to go too in-depth on it, just because this is also a game that the less you know about it going into it, the better off you are, and because you build up certain expectations as you read and hear more and more about a game. And that's not to say that this game is bad, because it's actually very good, and it's very heartfelt, but at the same time, it's one of those games that if you know a certain scene is coming up, it completely destroys the feeling of that scene. So I'm not going to say anything more about the story. I will say that it pretty much requires a gamepad of some sort, something with dual thumbsticks, because it has a unique way that you control both characters. Yes, it is essentially a local co-op game, which is really weird because you're playing as both brothers at the same time. And the puzzle element of the journey is usually helping the two brothers work together to overcome whatever obstacles come up, which is a really neat way of handling things because usually you'd play one brother, then hand off to another brother. But in this, you are playing both at the same time, and it takes a little bit of getting used to, but by the time you're, I would say, a quarter or a third of the way through the adventure, yeah, it's pretty much second nature, and not even think about it anymore. So I would say, pick up Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons if you're looking for something a little bit more heartfelt and probably want to cry a little bit this Christmas. It's $2.24 and well worth the entry. Okay, actually the last of the really strange entries, Tabletop Simulator. This is pretty much a must-get for anybody that has even a passing interest in any board games or tabletop RPGs, because it is a sandbox that allows you to build and play thousands of board games, tabletop RPGs, and just goof around with various card games. I will say that it is far better to go in this with a friend that also has this game, just because, yes, there are open servers that people can play, but they typically expect you to already know the games and be fairly good at them. So it's not for the faint at heart. There are some people that are willing to teach, but they are the minority by far. I'm not saying that people are jerks with the Tabletop Simulator. It's just one of those things that there's a certain expectation. So if you're looking to learn games, I would say it's best to go in with a friend. And the way the DLC for this game is set up, even though you could just go for years and years and years on the workshop content alone, because there are just thousands of games of varying quality, of course. There are good games, there are not so good games. But the DLC is set up so that only the host is needed to own the DLC if you're doing multiplayer. So it really cuts down on the entry price on a lot of board games, because board games can be very expensive, and the entry price for Tabletop Simulator is only $9.99, just squeaking under my limiter. And if you want to try out board games with a friend online, this is pretty much the way to do it. Okay, so let's go for a little bit of the more absurd for our next entry, BattleBlock Theater. There are a handful of platformers in the indie sphere that I would say that are pretty much must-tries for a platformer fan. But BattleBlock Theater is the slower paced of them, but that doesn't mean that it's easy. As a matter of fact, it is deceptively hard, particularly in the later stages. With over 400 stages, there takes you a while to get there, but it is well worth the journey. What really sets BattleBlock Theater apart from its contemporary counterparts is that, once again, it is the narrator. That's kind of been the running theme for a few of my entries. The humor of the narrator, and yes, the narrator can be a bit annoying, but you can also disable it if need be, at least if I recall correctly. But it's still that, the narrator making comments on your performance, either good or bad. And just the general humor of the game is what really drives it forward for me, because the platformer genre is very stale, and it takes a lot to really kind of break out and do your own thing. And BattleBlock Theater was able to do that with just a really good narration and a absurd story. And also, it probably doesn't help, it probably doesn't hurt that there's an absolute ton of levels on the workshop to be able to toy around with. And its multiplayer scene is still fairly strong. So anyway, that's BattleBlock Theater, and it is only $2.99. A very good deal for a very strong platformer. Okay, it's time to round out the list with our last entry, Cities Skylines. This is pretty much what I wanted the newest SimCity to be. Instead, SimCity decided that it didn't want to be SimCity anymore and wanted to be SimTown. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's not what I wanted. And City Skylines was able to deliver pretty much what I wanted when I saw what SimCity was attempting to offer. Is City Skylines perfect? No. It has some real problems with how it displays some information, and you are going to be fighting traffic a lot. And until you really get the feel for how traffic is handled, you are going to be very frustrated. And there are some other systems that are kind of hit or miss, particularly how death is handled in the game can be a little frustrating. There are mods to fix this, and the base game, even without mods, isn't terrible. It could just be a little frustrating at times because it feels like it's punishing you when it's just the system's not quite clicking like they should. That said, there really isn't a good modern city builder outside of City Skylines, so you're kind of starved for choice. So it's either go to an older city builder or try to work around these problems. And they aren't insurmountable, so it isn't that big a deal. It just can be a little frustrating at times, which, like I said, the game is not perfect. But it is $7.49, so it's at least something to be able to check out. And it is not that expensive. And it has 3 expansions out right now, 2 of which are very cheap and on sale right now, of mixed quality. After Dark is considered the best of the lot so far. It adds a lot of nightlife and touristy elements. Snowfall was kind of panned for not really adding that much and just being more of a headache than anything else. Granted, it does add a new option for mass transit, so you may want to look at that. And the just released Natural Disasters is well above the price cutoff, but it is essentially the ability to have natural disasters. So it's really, if you want to have the ability to make your city go boom, well, there you go. And, well, that rounds out the list. Okay, maybe a little bit more than 10 games on that, but, well, really, who's counting? Well, outside of people that maybe complain that there's more than 10 games on that list, but if so, why are you complaining that I offered more than 10 games? Anyway, anything that I missed? Be sure to let me know in the comments down below, and, well, subscribe if you see more of the Sunday Sampler. It's not always a list like this. It's usually first impressions of video games, but I am trying to make it a little bit more random. So we'll see just how the Sunday Sampler handles in the new year, because this is the last one of the year as well. And I also have 3 Let's Plays that are always, interesting to say the least. And of course, a podcast that I do with a friend of mine that comes out on Fridays at noon. So subscribe if you wish to check out all that. And, well, I will catch you next time, and thank you for listening, and have a very, very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.